and welcome to Two Profs in a Pod. I'm Tanisha.
I'm Beth.
And we are faculty here at Glendale Community College in Arizona, and we are faculty developers as well.
Today we have a special guest with us in the studio. This is Kimberly Williams. She's one of our colleagues here at Glendale Community College, and she teaches in the English and Creative Writing departments. And we're very excited to have her with us today to talk about
creativity. Yes, in the classroom.
Hi.
Hi.
Welcome, Kimberly.
Welcome.
It's great to be in the pod.
Three profs in a pod.
Yeah, three profs in a pod.
That's right.
So why are we talking about this?
We are talking about this, and Kimberly can say more about this, right? But she is conducting research with an MCLI learning grant and has talked to the faculty a little bit about it and asked us to help her by sending her students. And we're also talking about it because Robot Proof, the book, has been a recurring theme this school year since we talked with Dr. Terry Leyba Ruiz,
Yes.
our president, who has read the book, and we had an episode about Robot Proof.
Yes.
So that book talks a lot about creativity. So those are a couple reasons why we're talking about it today.
Yes, and I think another reason is that it just always seems to be a topic of interest in general. It's definitely on our radar on our campus because it's connected to one of our institutional learning outcomes. I personally think that it's a significant component of just our profession, which is teaching. Our profession requires creativity, especially in curriculum design and instruction. So we're really excited to have Kimberly on board with us to just continue this conversation. So we would love to hear what Kimberly has to say. If you could, well, introduce yourself first and let us
Okay.
know what you teach, and then you can jump right in.
Yes, and tell us, why do you think we should be talking about creativity?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm Kimberly Williams, and I teach English here at Glendale Community College. And specifically, I teach creative writing courses along with the composition courses. And I want to talk about this today. I'm here to talk about this today because I believe so strongly in the power that creativity has in our classrooms to really transform the classrooms, not to just a place of receptive learning, but to a place of active learning, a place where people really can develop wholly as whole individuals.
Mm-hmm.
I also am very excited to talk about it because I do think that while human beings are so innately creative, it is really something that's quite overlooked, especially in higher education, right? There's definitely a privilege towards critical and analytical thinking, which is very important,
Yeah.
right? But kind of a more whole, what's the word I want? A more well-rounded type of learning environment.
Can you tell us a little bit about the research that you're doing?
Well, the research that I'm doing is studying how creative thinking can complement analytical and critical thinking. I did that for a year in my composition classroom. So I chose a classroom where critical and analytical thinking definitely is really what we want our students to be doing through their writing. But then I devised some creative components and some ways into the analytical thinking through creative thinking. And my results did show that students tend to have the most effective assignments when they're allowed to do both creative and critical thinking, and where they're in complementary unison. I don't want to say unison because that's just one, but they work together.
So they're kind of like complementary.
Yes.
Yes.
As opposed to, we were kind of talking a little bit earlier before we recorded about how there's sort of this division between creative and the more logical, analytical.
Right.
And really what my own research showed me is that the best results are when both types of thinking happen together in the same assignment. They don't necessarily happen at the same time, but there's opportunities for students in the assignment to do both types of thinking.
Love that.
And I think that's great because I think a lot of people do have that either or mindset, which we were talking about earlier, as opposed to having an and both mindset as far as, well, you're either creative or you're just logical, critical, and analytical. And I've always thought, well, why can't we be both? And
Right.
it's great to hear that there's information that really backs that up, that the best type of assignments are the ones that include both sides.
There's research that backs that up. There's research, and I don't have it in front of me, but there's research that shows that as children, 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds are capable of creative thinking, about using about 98% creative thinking, right, available to them.
Wow.
By the time they get to 12th grade, they're down to about 11%.
Ooh.
And so then those are the
low.
students who are coming to us, right? And it's just not something that I think our education system really concentrates on or values. And research is also showing that in our current society and where we're headed as a global economy, that this is going to be imperative. Creative thinking is going to be imperative.
I'm glad you brought that up, and I put this later in our notes for today, but I'll just kind of bring it up now. I'm glad you brought up our education system and how it values or devalues creativity, and having been teaching for almost 30 years now, I've seen waves of creativity being valued and then being devalued and kind of going up and down. And of course, there's no room in preparing students for standardized testing for
Right.
creativity.
That's right.
Yeah.
There's no room.
There's no room.
And I agree with you that there are sort of phases where creativity might be more highly valued than other times, but the need for creative thinkers in our world is not going to go away.
Right.
Right? So whatever's happening in education in terms of currents, right, that need in the world, especially to keep ourselves globally competitive and just really a part of, it's a world economy now. It just is. We need people who are what they call agile thinkers, right? People who can really think in a moment in a way that may not necessarily be linear at all. And because that's a skill that our students are going to be needing, we really want to be able to provide them with that. And the idea is simply just to give them the opportunities to do this kind of thinking so that their brains are used to it. I mean, there's even just some practical neurological things, that we can do with our students to prepare them.
And I think what's also interesting is some of the information you shared in some of the notes that we have about how the world is changing.
Yes.
And because of these changes, you wrote how we really need to keep up or really focus on keeping up. So could you share some of that information that you shared with us?
Sure. So first, I have an article by Dr. Robert E. Johnson, who is the president of Becker College, and he wrote the article together with Heather E. McGowan, who has an MBA. The title of the article is The University Class of 2020, An Agile Mindset Imperative. And this is from December 2017, so it's not even a year old yet. Some statistics that I'd like to share are that 65% of school-age children today will likely work in jobs that do not yet exist. 47% of total U.S. employment is at high risk for replacement by computerized automation in the next 2 decades. And that kind of takes us back to the robot proof book, too.
Right.
Exactly.
That's its premise. Over the next 20 years, we will experience as much change in the way we work as we have in the previous 2,000 years. So
That's kind of mind-blowing right there.
Yeah.
it is really
Wow.
mind-blowing.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, so I tried to do some really rough math, right? My calculations could be off, but I'm thinking the students we have right now, we're preparing them, their careers will probably be at their peak, right? They're most mature around 2050. We have no idea what the world will look like in 2050. Ken Robinson says this in one of his TED Talk videos too. We're literally preparing our students for a future that we can't anticipate because technology has just outpaced human imagination and the way, the way our societies are structured. And so we're always going to be sort of doing this ad hoc. And the best thing we can do is equip them for that kind of agile thinking, to equip them in ways that will prepare them for the unexpected. Linear thinking only really prepares you for the expected.
And we're going to get to that coming up here, right?
Okay.
Not immediately, but coming up in the next few minutes, how to get our students to be agile thinkers.
Yes.
Okay. Coming up. So do you want to share this other piece that research says, this quote that you have for us?
Oh, yes, I do. So one of the I don't know if you can call him a founding father, but one of the first research specialists who really took up the study of creativity is the psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. He has a book called Creativity, The Psychology of Discovery and Invention. And I just wanted to share a passage of it that I find so compelling that I actually just shared it with my students this week. So it says, "You would think that given its importance, creativity would be a high priority among our concerns. But in fact, there's a lot of lip service paid to it, but in reality, we see a different picture. Basic scientific research is minimized in favor of immediate practical applications. The arts are increasingly seen as dispensable luxuries that must prove their worth. In one company after another, downsizing continues. One hears that this is not an age for innovation, but for bookkeepers, not a climate for building and risk-taking, but for cutting expenses. Yet as the economic competition heats up around the globe, exactly the opposite strategy is needed. And what holds true for the sciences, the arts, and the economy also applies to education. When school budgets tighten and the test scores wobble, more and more schools are opting to dispense with the frills, which usually come in the form of arts and extracurricular activities, to focus instead on the so-called basics. This would not be bad if the 3 R's were taught in ways that encouraged originality and creative thinking, but unfortunately they rarely are. Students generally find the basic academic subjects threatening or dull, and their chance of using their minds in creative ways comes only in the form of working in the student paper, being in the drama club, or in the orchestra. If the next generation is to face the future with zest and self-confidence, we must educate them to be original as well as competent. And I really see this as our job, our jobs as educators, is to educate them in originality as well as competency.
Yes, that's so much truth. The whole time you were reading it, I was like, yes, preach.
I know it's a long quote.
No, I loved it. Yeah, so relevant and so true.
The context is just, I think it really gives us the context for really rethinking the choices that we're making.
Right.
Well, and to me, you know, what I hear in that is when we get afraid,
Yes.
and by we I mean education experts, right? We shrink.
Right.
We shrink instead of expand.
That's right. Oh, that's a really good observation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we need to expand.
We need to expand. Absolutely. Yeah. I've got loads of other recent articles from 2017, 2018 that really are saying that one of the results of all of this knowledge that we have predicting what's coming is that we want people actually to specialize less and generalize more. And our education system really has become really immersed in the culture of the higher you go, the more you specialize. And that's something else we kind of need to reverse too. A lot of this is very counterintuitive because of the way we do it currently, but is very intuitive if you were to look at it without seeing or knowing the way it is we do now.
And that's interesting that you say that, because I've heard that, like, maybe 4 years ago, a professor mentioned this when I was like studying, and how it seems like there is this slight shift towards more generalists
Yes.
than there are specialists. And I was like, oh, well, that's really interesting. So it just seems like that's going to be maybe more and more of reality as time goes on. So I heard that like 4 years ago. So
Right.
hearing that now just reinforces what he said to me years ago.
That's right.
So, do we want to talk about what we say?
Yes. What do we say?
We've heard from some research. So, what do we say? What do you say, Kimberly?
Well, I already said what is scripted. As a nonlinear person,
What
I
else
often
do you
go
wanna
out of
say?
order. So no, but this is great. What I really want to say is I really want to emphasize too how just adding creative thinking. I'm not in any way suggesting that we should not do critical thinking, right, or analytical thinking, but simply that we supplement it, we augment it, to really allow students to think towards assignments and think about assignments in the widest way possible. I do believe that this is the most inclusive way we can teach right now, that it's a very inclusive form of teaching, and because of that, inherently it will allow more students to be more successful. And I think that's very important to emphasize. So that's what I want to say.
Yeah, I agree. Totally. I think I had a little experience with creativity this week, just slightly, that has to do with students too. And hearing you talk, Kimberly, makes me think of the times when I may not say this aloud to my students, but in my head I think I need to give my students permission to do something beyond what they think the assignment calls for.
Yes.
Right? And I feel like at times when I do that, and when maybe I even say, you're allowed to, whatever that might be, fill in the blank, then suddenly I get something a little bit better.
Yes.
Right.
yes.
And yeah, this hearing you makes me also want to say to them at moments when I see them doing something more creative in an academic essay where we might be like, oh, I don't know if you should really do that. Makes me want to say, I really appreciate that effort at being really creative right there.
That's right.
That's nice.
All writing, because it produces something brand new, is inherently a creative act, right? Whether they're writing within a discipline, let's say they're writing an analytical report on some psychological topic, that paper still in itself is a creative act, right? And I think when we start acknowledging that all writing is a creative act, then we immediately open the way for more creativity to come through. You can always go at the back end, right, and revise,
Yes.
and think about your purpose and your audience and adjust accordingly. But I think a lot of times all the prescription that we tend to give our students, it should be this, it should be this, it should be that, that's the greatest inhibitor right away to any
Yes.
kind of creative momentum or motion, right? So we're stopping before we even start.
Yes. Thank you for joining us for part 1 of our 2-part conversation on creativity with Kimberly Williams, English faculty here at GCC. We hope you will tune in next time to part 2 of this thought-provoking interview.